Welcome to the podcast Appetite for Horror, episode number 17. My name is Brando. Coming up in just a moment, director of all 7 Sharknado films, Anthony C. Ferrante. I'm excited for you to hear this episode for a few reasons. It was a lot of fun to speak with Anthony, and two, I've been holding on to this interview for weeks. Not to build up anything, suspense, but I don't know if you're listening and you have small children. They take up a lot of your time. So my 4-month-old son, Harrison for the sake of this podcast, in addition to my regular radio job and the Mothership podcast, Appetite for Distortion, just been eating up so much of my time. So I apologize to you for not getting this to you sooner. We'll talk more about that and then what's going on with this podcast and everything of that ilk after the interview, because I want you to enjoy it. And if you are listening on iHeartRadio or Apple Podcasts, the audio version of this podcast, you could watch on the Appetite for Distortion YouTube page. There's an Appetite for Horror section up there, and I conducted this interview over Zoom, so you get to watch Anthony and I talk rather than listen, if that's your fancy. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you're like, shut up, play the interview already. So here you go. How are you, Anthony?
I'm doing good. I'm here in New York. Got to do a bunch of my favorite haunts last night while I was here, so I'm pretty happy.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm also in New York. I'm in Queens. I work with Michael right there, but I work from home, obviously.
Oh, okay, great.
I've been watching a lot of horror movies, including rewatching the Sharknados with my 3-month-old son, Harrison, a.k.a. Horrison. I've learned he's not that great with jump scares, so I've had to pause it at times.
Have you seen Nyx? That was a movie I did a couple years ago. Last year it came out, and it's my little indie horror film. Really proud of it. It's really dark and different and not what people expect. It's kind of a movie about trauma and addiction.
Nyx? Okay, I'm always looking for a new one, so I was not aware of that. I apologize.
No, it's fine. If you see it, text me or Twitter me, because I love horror fans actually seeing it, because it's not a traditional horror movie. We had independent money, and we go, well, you know what? It's going to sell based off of the monster on the poster, but let's do something for ourselves, and let's make something that has a little bit more depth to it, and see if people respond.
This is what I love about you, because people might think the director of Sharknado and they might think one thing, but you have such a history and love and passion for the genre. So before we get into the 10th anniversary, kind of where did it all start for you? When were you bitten by that werewolf, that horror bug that really got you into this genre and passion for your life?
Well, funny that you say werewolf, because that's what I was many Halloweens, because I loved, they would re-air all the Wolfman and Werewolf of London on, those old black and white movies on TV.
Sure.
So I love those. I think I got the love of horror from my mom, and so I watched a lot of things I probably shouldn't have seen as a kid. And then I also had access to the movie theater in my hometown, and they, I was reviewing movies for my class paper, and they just give me a pass, and I'd go see everything. But when I was in 6th grade, I was sitting, instead of at recess, having recess with my fellow students, I would be sitting there looking at the newspaper about the movies I wanted to go see that weekend. And then all of a sudden it sparked me where I'm like, I want to make movies. And it was just one of those things that came out of the ether. And I came from a small town in Northern California where it didn't have access to equipment or anything. So I started writing reviews for my class paper. And so I used that as my entree into trying to learn everything I could about film. And horror movies affected me. It was like I love them. It took you to a different place. And so getting a chance to actually make films and pay it forward, it's just been, it's just been an amazing experience for me. And a lot of stuff. I've seen so many different movies and not just horror films. So when you set out to do something, I know pretty much everything that's been done. So how do you do it and divert the attention? And then in the case of the Sharknado movies, paying homage to things that, so if people are paying attention, it's like, oh, wow, they just made a network a reference with Howard Beale, So I think that's the part of the love of film, just kind of going in there and hoping that maybe I'm affecting that one person that's sitting on their the playground at recess going, maybe one day I want to make movies, because Because this is this is like I say it a lot. It's a 1 in a million chance where you actually get to go and make a movie, but to actually have a movie that is still in the pop cultural zeitgeist 10 years later is unfathomable. And we're going theatrical after a TV run,
Yeah,
so it's crazy.
it really is. And I'm sure you get this question a lot. Can you take me back to when the idea came about? Because there have been those kind of movies before, Ice Spiders, Mecha Dinovers.
Mansquito.
Yeah, you go back to the 70s, there's always a weird thing, but they don't always click. They don't always hit. And you're talking to somebody whose favorite movie of all time is Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Yes,
That hit,
yep.
that hit, but not many of those hits. So what made Sharknado, the light bulb go off? And
Well, I was the horror guy at Sci-Fi. I was right. I'd done a couple movies for them. I was writing a lot of scripts for them that were horror based. And so you come up with a bunch of different pitches. And a buddy of mine who I've written some scripts with, Jacob Hare, I was going, okay, you know what? In addition to these horror pitches, let's come up with two of the most ridiculous ideas we can think of. And I think Jake said Sharknado, and then we talked about lava birds. And when we said Sharknado, it was like, this is the best title ever, and we fell in love with it. We pitched it to the network twice. It was rejected. I made a reference to it in a script I was writing for them called Red Clover, aka Leprechaun's Revenge.
mm,
And then they saw the title, they're going, we must make this movie. And then the Asylum started developing this thing called Sharkstorm to go, you're using this title Sharknado. And then I got sucked up into the Sharknado universe to do it. I lobbied to do it, and Sci-Fi didn't want me to direct it because they go, he's the horror guy, he doesn't know how to do this. And so I had to prove them wrong and make sure they never made another movie without it being compared to Sharknado again.
oh
But
wow.
we knew how crazy this thing was. And again, every time we said the word Sharknado to someone, it just made people smile. And so, there was something about that title. I mean, yeah, they had Sharktopus, Mansquito, all this stuff, but what was it about Sharknado? I don't know. But I think part of it was, the title, also the cast, and then also we delivered on the premise with our little tiny budget. And I think that's, was the promise of the premise. And you see the trailer for a lot of these movies, and you go, oh, they can't sustain that for 90 minutes. But then you see our Sharknado trailer and watch the movie and going, this isn't stopping. How the heck are they doing this? This is like a studio movie on a steroid budget
Yeah,
of dollars.
you're absolutely right. It really is one of those movies. There's no slow burn. It's kind of right into it. Do you have a
Well, well, just think about the opening of the movie was originally the script says Sharknado attacks ship, and I go, well, if we're gonna be on a ship, let's turn it into something. And then Jake and I were going, let's do a drug deal, but with shark fins on a boat. And it's like, I don't even know how we got away with that in this movie because it wasn't even in the original script. So we're doing, this bizarro action film at the beginning of the movie.
is there, whether it's the first one or not another one, the second, any of the sequels, that there's a moment like that where you're like, I can't believe we got away with this?
There's a lot of those. I can't believe we got away with it. I mean, I think just him chainsawing his way out of the shark in the first movie. But I go back to Tara Reid's robotic head, like in the fifth film, where it's the end of the world. Finn is the last man on Earth, and he thinks his wife is his wife, but she's actually a robot, and he has her severed head. And he's cradling it, and he's and I always make fun of when people say no in movies, like no, because no one ever says that. If someone's good about ready to die, they're going, oh my god. And so we do the whole thing where he's going no, and we we pan up with it. So I think the thing that I can't believe we did six movies. I think more so than anything, how is it that we were able to do six movies, tell a complete story, the director and the two leads from beginning to end, and we got to finish it. We didn't end up finishing it with suddenly Eric Estrada's playing Finn. We finished it the way it should be finished. And in the fourth movie, I had the idea for what I wanted to do with the ending, and I got to do the ending. And what filmmaker can say that they started a franchise and killed it?
Ah, that's very true. Oh, I love it. Brilliant. And I know you have a lot of interviews to do today, but I got to ask about another film you worked on that's kind of a niche that I'm surprised you never know. It could have bombed, but that's The Dentist.
Oh yes.
Love the dentist. Do you have a
Well,
favorite memory of working on set there?
that I was the special makeup effects supervisor on it and second unit director, and I'd known Brian Usna through Fangoria, and he gave me the opportunity to be involved in that movie, and I learned so much from him. And Corbin Burnson was so amazing in that movie. J.M. Logan came in to do a lot of the makeup effects on that film, and that was my first big movie when I moved to Los Angeles. And I just remember us being in the makeup effects room trying to do this stuff, and we didn't know any better. We just kept, we were doing 24-hour days, and we built this oversized mouth, and my hand is the one jabbing the teeth, and I know that now, that's why the dentists hate me, and that's because they know I made this film. But we should mention that Sharknado theatrical experience, it's sharknado10th.com. If you go to the website, you can figure out where the theaters are playing it, but it's a completely different experience than the original TV version. We've remastered in 4K, added new shots, went back to the original cut of the movie, and I was able to build things in that we didn't have time or money to do, remixed it. So it's kind of it's a remix of what you saw. So it's designed for the theatrical experience. So even if you think you've seen the movie, you haven't seen it this way, and it just looks incredible. So for me to kind of revisit that original movie 10 years later and in some ways finish it, I think that it's not only going to get the original fans, but it's going to get people that know the movie, but they know it by name only. And so we have a whole new generation that are going to go there and understand why this thing was the thing it was, that it's just this crazy crazy ridiculous shark movie that doesn't stop.
Amazing. I can't wait to see it out in theaters. Anthony, thank you so much for your time. I hope we get to do this again.
No, thank you, Brand. I really appreciate it. And check out Nick's, my little horror film from last year. It's a very dark horror film that I think will surprise a lot of people.
I will.
It's not what everybody expects from me.
I like dark. I like sharks. All good.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anthony.
Bye.
Anthony was really cool. As you could tell, we could have kept going. I love doing interviews where it makes you a bigger fan of that person's work. I think that's the point, right? Like, yeah, you're going to interview people that you admire and you like their work already, but I think there are those that you might not know that you're first learning about the kind of interview, and those are always interesting because you're learning along with the audience, and we're learning along together. But with the Sharknado films, I don't know if I've seen all 7. I've seen the majority of them. But I decided to watch a few of them to prepare for this interview, and I didn't really like them at first. I have to preface it with that. I thought what they were, which was corny, and I like a lot of corny stuff. Hey, I'm the guy that Killer Clowns from Outer Space is my favorite movie, so I'm not going to go too up and in, but it was just like it didn't grab me. The Sharknado. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like, one of my favorite films. However, doing the research on Anthony, knowing that this guy is a student of horror, and then watching these films made me enjoy them more. And then after talking with him, I'm now a full-fledged fan of these films. It just gives me a new perspective on what they are. And and what it is, it's a sci-fi B horror movie, a tornado filled with sharks. I mean, how deep can you go? But when you get to know the director, the mastermind behind it, and think about his choices, why did maybe he pick this actor, or why did this joke, or is this a reference to something? And I don't know, it makes you appreciate it more. Like if he happened to have been a jerk, I'm like, oh, good. I'm never going to watch Sharknado again. But now, whenever it's on Sci-Fi or if I see it on streaming, I'm more inclined now to watch it because I've gotten to spend some time talking with Anthony, and I really enjoyed it. So this interview, as I mentioned at the beginning, was recorded a few weeks ago from when I'm posting this, and I would have had to have gotten it out the very next day for it to have been on time with the 10th anniversary event. So I apologize to Anthony, but I don't think me getting out the interview was going to make or break the event. I'm nothing special. Hopefully in the future, this podcast will build up the base the Appetite for Distortion has, but that's another story. So that just wasn't going to happen. And then just time, jobs, Appetite for Distortion, and then just watch. I work from home. with this DIY studio. And when I'm watching him, you can't get anything done. For those of you who are parents, I'm saying, you're nodding your head. You're saying, of course, you should have known this. I can't get anything done. So at the time I'm recording this, my wife has taken Horace out to her dance studios, having some sort of parade kind of thing. So I have a moment to myself to finally record this. But all of that being said, that has not stopped me from watching horror. And if you happen to fall upon this podcast, or whenever you do, because I've done the Appetite for Distortion, the Guns N' Roses podcast for 7 years, and to this day, I still get people that said they still find me. I just found you, and we'll go back in my catalog. That's so cool. So who knows when you're going to hear this. If you hear this the day I post it, if you hear it years later or whatever, I'm always going to be a fan of horror, so that's continued. And what I usually do, and maybe you can relate, is that I spend maybe more time scrolling through the streaming services, Tubi, Amazon, the ones I have or share, Hulu, Peacock, just all of it, trying to find that perfect horror movie, just the one I'm really feeling. And I kind of just go one and done for the most part. There are certain films that I will watch again. Of course, my favorite films of all time, I will watch more than once. But for horror, I kind of I'm on a mission to see as much as I can, to find the weirdest, to find the most obscene, the most offensive, the corniest. So I'm everywhere. But that takes a lot of time, and sometimes there's nothing, and you waste all this time, and you end up on something you really didn't like that much. It's like, okay, but that's, I guess, part of the search of horror, and part of the allure of the artwork that horror, especially, I think, more than any other genre, is known for, especially the B movie horror, where the cover looks amazing, but it's some friends shooting on their camcorder, which sometimes is great, sometimes it's not, but that's the beauty of horror. So, and I will say, before I forget, sometimes there is a big payoff where you find a film that completely passed you by. No matter what year, there are just a variety of films that seem to pass me by. I don't know how, no matter how much I search. This was from 2021, Ankle Biters. Ankle Biters. It's not what you think unless you see the poster. And these 4 little blonde girls and their mom and their mom's boyfriend. And wow, these 4 little blonde actresses, like legit kids. I don't know if any of them have even hit 10. Are so funny, really act their age, but it's shot so well, and it's so vicious at times and funny. So I absolutely loved Ankle Biters. And there was another movie that I can't believe passed me by, because I just turned 40, and so that means there's a lot. The early 90s, because born in 83, so the early 90s was like my wheelhouse of like references when I knew about things. And I don't know how 1994's Brain Scan completely passed me by. Never knew about it, with Edward Furlong. And it's totally 90s and totally awesome. Totally. So I really enjoyed finding these gems after searching and being like, what's this? Maybe you've seen these, maybe you haven't. But I have done a couple rewatches. Ones that I knew that, while I'm doing a lot of work, while I'm babysitting my son, I can maybe have on in the background. Low volume this time, because he's at that age where he's well aware of sound and he will get scared. So I have to pull back the reins a little bit on getting him involved with horror movies like that. But I rewatched the Devil's Candy with Ethan Embry. So good. So good. All his real tattoos, by the way. The lead from Can't Hardly Wait just turns into this with a wig, because he's like me, like a lot of men have lost their hair, so they gave him like a metal look with the long hair, but all those tattoos were his, and I just thought it was so well done. The girl in it was awesome. The one that played his daughter, just absolutely awesome. And We Are Still Here is such a fun film. Another one I have watched repeatedly, and it's just from 2015, just so good. It's so it's just like a fun watch, and just one of my more favorite current horror movies that I got to put on, and I just like it every time. So I'm trying to get into these because I may I've seen this film. And I'll give you an example right now. I'm currently rewatching Come to Daddy. Sometimes if you just say that without any context, you're like, what the hell are you watching? It's a comedy horror with Elijah Wood from 2019, and I know I've seen it, but I really don't remember a lot about it. I just went to go see it, and I don't know, I was legally smoking weed at the time, and I don't remember a lot, to be completely honest. So I'm rewatching it again and just enjoying it more. So I'm like, oh yeah, this happened and that happened, kind of thing. But We Are Still Here and The Devil's Candy, those are ones I could watch or repeat. And this one, for some reason, there are people who love to hate it, but The Babadook, I mean, of course, extremely popular, but there's now that class of horror fan that's just like, this isn't, I don't like the Babadook. The Babadook is great. Just you want to strangle that little kid, but once he realized he's really trying to save his mom, he's just like annoying like any little kid is going to be with the high-pitched squeals. But yeah, just another recent modern-era horror film that I just think is well done and I really enjoy. And somebody who usually I like to go back to the 80s and 90s for the top tier horror, just the way, because the way practical effects were done. Like some of them, I know this is practical effects, it may not look real, but I guess we'll always prefer it 10 out of 10 times to special effects. I hate it, even when the special effects are just with blood. Go the trauma route. Just go blood everywhere where it's corn syrup or ketchup or whatever, but just to see the computer generated image just immediately takes me out. It just does. So I obviously have a lot of opinions and want to talk about horror more than I have been able to. As my wife just says, Harrison's coming back. See? But now I gotta wrap up. This is how it is. So here's the deal with Appetite for Horror. It's always going to be an outlet for me, for us, to be able to speak with and converse about our favorite horror movies, our favorite horror actors, our actresses, the scenarios, topics. I just don't know how often it's going to be. So, as I mentioned, you could find me whenever, wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm heavily every day with the Appetite for Distortion podcast, and I've been covered by many an online rock magazine over the years. And again, there are people still finding me to this day. So no reason to give up. If I have this microphone here in my home, I think it's going to be a lot of fun when Harrison, a.k.a. Harrison, is going to be old enough to watch some of our favorite horror movies for the first time and get his reactions. But, of course, I'm speaking into the future. And I think as far as this year, when we get close to Halloween, I will probably have more interviews for you, too. So look for more in October, because with Halloween coming, there's a lot of people promoting books and movies, a lot of more promotions, just like how Anthony was. But I will hopefully get those out on time. So anyway, that does it for this episode of Appetite for Horror. It's funny. If you listen to the past few episodes, or even all these episodes, I've had a hard time coming up with an ending, because I'm an old school radio guy. I like to bookend my show with a certain saying, and I couldn't figure it out at first. I was like boils and ghouls. I don't want to do that. Shout out to my friends at Dad's That's from the Crypt. That's their thing, boils and ghouls. Because I was in a big Tales from the Crypt kick for a while anyway. Then I had that big Walking Dead conversation with my radio buddy David Brody, and he just said, "Don't die," and I just thought that was so funny. It's so overtly simple and just to the point. I thought for a horror podcast, just don't die. However, I do a lot of these recordings with my wife around and listening, and she heard that and she's like, "Don't die." Yeah. And she never says that. She likes what I do. She's the kind of person, as I just showed you, that will tell me if something sucks. She's like, don't die. That's not clever. I don't like that. I'm all right. So she helped me come up with, well, until next time, keep your appetite for horror satiated.